Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in the New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, I'm going to go back to those two phrases and reiterate their meanings because they are super powerful today. Namaste comes from the Sanskrit spoken. It's called Brahmi, and what it means is the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. Quite interesting, eh? Now, in la catch comes from the other side of the world, the Mayan civilization, and it simply means I am another you. So thinking about ancient philosophy, bringing that to today, if we could look at each other and recognize each other from that place, what kind of changes do you think that might cause in our lives, the lives of others, and in the world at large? Just think about that. Try it, experiment with it. Don't believe me, try it for yourself. I think you'll find it true. All right, so this week's guest is Nehemiah de Jesus Davila, and he goes by Neo Positivity. He is the one. And of course, he was called that. He got the nickname as a undercover policeman working for the Camden City, New Jersey Police Department, and later he became a whistleblower on that same department and got some notoriety in Fox News and Philadelphia newspapers. And oddly enough, interestingly enough, not oddly, as you can tell, he's quite fit. He's a free agent in the National Football League. He's also the voice of Thoughts Become Things movement. He's a creator of Thoughts Become Things Summit, and he's also the podcast host of Off the Bench, a coach's perspective. You can find him on the web at neopositivity.com. Neo, glad to have you here, brother.
Thank you. That was a great intro. I might have to change some things up, but it was a great intro.
All right. Well, you know, I give what I share what I can find, and sometimes that's a lot, sometimes it's a little, but nonetheless, it's great to have you here. You've got a great attitude and wonderful perspective of life. So let's just dig into that. When you were, younger, how did you first become aware that there was this sense of, well, for lack of a better righteousness that wasn't present? And by righteousness, I mean by right use of will, right? And the things that are necessary in order to live your life in accordance with some kind of harmony with people and planet. How did you find that out, and what was the beginning of that process? Because I'm sure that that kind of awareness didn't come instantly. That was something that grew.
You know what? I think it was just, there's a lot of things that were already just in me. I was born that type of person. So it was just a way of life for me. And, when you're a child, you don't see what's going on in dangerous places and stuff like that. Like, you just think everything's all bright and everything. So as you get older, then you start to see, and then you can appreciate things and hear things. And that's when you learn, okay, I am a little bit different. I do see things a lot differently from most of the people. Then you feel isolated. But for me, it was always like a happy isolation. I'm over here, but I'd rather be over here. Like I've carried the burden on my shoulders of watching my family and friends.
Easy for you to say, right?
Yeah, right. Watching my family and friends not be on this page, it just sucks. It just really does. But I was born like this. So discovering the law of attraction and having a solid playbook on everything kind of wrapped it all up and made life make sense to me.
Sure.
But
now,
I was always this guy.
Let's talk about that isolation, because I can relate. I was born that way too, and noticed that my life was much different early on, and I felt isolated, and yet I was able to I was a gregarious kid in spite of that. I was still alone in a crowd, kind of like you felt. What was that like, and how did that evolve to you being able to express yourself a little better, and how you were noticing the differences and maybe drawing attention to others as to what could change in their perspective?
I was always an athlete, and I was always like the captain of the team, such like karate and football. You know, I was always the number one guy. So I was isolated in that sense also. You know, it's
Mhm.
like the foreman. You know, you got everybody, you all work together, but on the same note, you're
You're
the
it.
big guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
the one that's handing out punishments, and you're the one that if you don't like this stuff has to change. So I guess that made that kind of isolation feel like second nature to me. You know, when you were talking, it just kind of dawned on me. I'm listening to you. I'm like, oh wow. So I'm like learning things about myself as you're asking questions. You're
Yeah,
like Dr. Phil.
apocalyptic chat, right? Cool.
But yeah, you know, there was a part of me, I didn't accept the normal. Everybody accepted that you were probably going to work in some factory and live in this county for the
Mhm.
rest of your life. And the thought of that, every single time I thought of that, it was no.
It's
Like
excruciating, right?
it was just like it was so far. I don't know how I knew, but I knew that that was just not me. That was not meant for me. That's not where I was going to be. That's not where. And so when people would try to knock me down, I just didn't care. I didn't care. And I saw that I was the only one around me that didn't care. And I said the same thing that I said before. I'd rather be like this than that. So I'm cool with my bubble.
Yeah,
You
I'm
guys
happy
come
with
and
me.
join
You
me.
guys can be
Yeah.
whoever you want,
You can be
and
as
I'm fine with that.
miserable. Yeah, you can be as miserable as you want and watch the news and believe that the world is going to crap and you're never going to get out of this town. You can believe that all you want. I'm good, to each his own. You're welcome to come join me in this. I'm not limited to anything. Don't tell me the sky's the limit if there's footprints on the room. You're welcome to join me over here if you want. I hope you join me over here, but I'm cool with being over here. So I was cool with the isolation for
Sure.
good reason, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Because it for one would seem. Let me pose the question. So, in that sense of being who you are and that anchor that you felt in the connection that you had to something beyond you that was feeding you this sense of okay, I'm different, and I'm okay with that, and I know that things are going to roll out better, and for me because of that, and the idea that, as you say, thoughts become things. So these considerations that the others that you just mentioned had, that's probably exactly how their lives played out because that's how they believed they would.
Yeah,
And they
it
didn't
did. They're
question
on
it.
Facebook right now complaining.
Right, right. And then there's those who are saying, hey guys, how about psst, psst, look over here, we're having fun over here. Wouldn't you like to have some fun? Wouldn't you like to feel free of the constraints that have been placed on you to actually explore what your passions and purpose are?
That's the key thing. I don't agree with the school system at all because passion and purpose don't have anything to do with it. It's like the school is training you to be a factory worker. We're going to give you a little bit of information on a whole bunch of different subjects that most you'll never use. We're not going to care about what you're interested in. We're going to train you a little bit in everything. And that's just enough to be a factory worker.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? Somebody has to work at the factory. And
Oh,
I get
sure.
that, but don't just train us all to do that.
Right.
If somebody like me and you is looking for bigger and better, then let them go. I know plenty of people that are cool with the factory. They enjoy it. They go take their kids to cheerleading practice.
Yeah.
So
And they're good
separate
people.
us. Yeah. So separate us, send us on our path, send them on their path earlier than later. Because once you're released from school, your senior year, there's no more training.
Right.
There's nobody to send you on any path. It's for you to make the choice, and all you know is one way at that point.
Absolutely. And I actually taught high school for a number of years and wrote a business plan for a model school afterwards with those things that you're talking about that was missing. That was back in 2002. And I was told by the director of education for Child Protective Services for Arizona, he loved it. He said, Zen, you're light years ahead of us. I don't know if I'll ever catch up. And what that plan was based on was very similar to what the Russians do. My wife's Russian. She's from St. Petersburg. She was trained as a pianist starting at 5 years old. So they do the assessment, the aptitude, the attitude, the skill set. And then they take that and nurture the children in ways that they're actually geared for, right?
Wow.
And they get the smattering of education, the rounded education in, in addition to that specific area of focus that they had. And she became a world-class pianist. She actually accompanied Mikhail Baryshnikov and his
Nice.
ballet. So, she's had those kinds of things, that, as many of us do. You've had similar experiences as well, and people you've met and had relationships with, even though they might have been short term, and it was still the impact of them
Hmm.
and the way that you came to them. Now let's talk about that a little bit. The way you came to them, the process, the how thoughts become things, right? What did you notice in the as the difference in how, and you probably didn't do it initially because as kids, we don't know how to articulate these things to others, to share, to find out if others actually think like us, because we think like this and everybody
Hmm.
must, right? The fact is they don't.
Nope.
So how did you find out over the years, or even in the short term, how you were thinking affected your reality?
The movie The Secret. Yeah, I was 28 years old. I was a cop in the most dangerous city in America. And my partner was a retired CIA agent. He said, listen, there's this movie that they make all the academy recruits watch every year. And I'm like, oh, yeah, SWAT team. I'm thinking there's going to be guns and
Right,
rapid
right.
deployment. And he tells me it's called The Secret. And I'm like, ooh, it's even a secret. And then I watched the movie and I'm like, this can't be what he was talking about, but this is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. I was going to call him immediately and say, yo, I don't know if this is what you meant to send me, but I still have never made that phone call because I'm so caught up in what the heck I heard. And it was just life changing. This phrase, thoughts become things, the examples, it started to add up. Everything, like we played high school football, our games were always on Saturday mornings
Mm.
because there was always fights and stuff at nighttime. So they made us do them Saturday mornings at like 11 o'clock, noon. And I would go out and I would stand on the edge of the field, right in the end zone, underneath the goalpost. And I would, 5 yard out, 10 yard post, touchdown. All right, start over.
Right, right.
10 yard in, quick slant. I just visualized, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And every half an hour, a player would come out of the locker room and say, hey, Neo, you okay? Like, what are you doing out here just by yourself staring at the grass? And, I would just tell them, I'm going over my playbook. I want to make sure I memorize. I'm going over my playbook. But later on, when I saw The Secret, it made me realize I was visualizing. I was watering seeds, you know? And so, yeah, that movie changed everything. It really got me meditative, got me to meditate. It got me thinking more spiritually. I was always spiritual, but I never asked myself questions. Like information would come to me and it would make sense. And I would say, okay, that's probably how things go.
Mm-hmm.
But I never, like now I go proactively and ask questions and get answers.
And let me ask you this. Do you try to answer those questions with your current thinking, or do you shut up and listen?
There's only one way to do it, and that's to shut up. If you answer them with your current thing, I mean, current to me, current is so yesterday.
Yeah, yeah.
You said something earlier about the current moment being more important than what's going on up here. Like out there became more important than what's going on up here. Out here keeps changing. Just now when I said that, that moment is dead and gone. And if something that changes that much, it doesn't hold much value to me. Meanwhile, what's going on up here is creating my future. It sounds a lot more important,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a better headspace to be in. I can control every single thing that happens. So up here has become more important to me than what's out here. And that was a change that needed to happen for me to be like really, really able to manipulate the flow of energy around me or use the law of attraction in my favor.
Right,
So
right.
it became a whole mind makeover, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. And those who have gone down that path will testify, and they will witness that fact. Now, let's talk about the process a little bit of mind management, which is kind of what you're talking about. How did you first recognize the thoughts you were having and whether they were in harmony or dissonance with what you truly desired? And how did you adjust those on the fly when it happened?
I learned that watching The Secret. because I tried to run scenario. I said, "Ooh, I got to think about stuff to make it happen. Let me run a couple scenarios," and I couldn't. And I said, "What the heck is going on?" And at that point, I knew I had to learn how to meditate. Because if you want to learn how to control your mind, you have to practice controlling your mind, which is like meditation. And then that was hard. And I remember it was 16 days. I'll never forget 16 days of me trying to meditate. Not all day, but a lot. You remember, I
Sure.
remember I'm a cop. I got kids.
Right.
But I was trying every day, several times a day, and I just couldn't sit with my own thoughts. It was a bad experience, basically. Enough to where I would just stop. And I remember on the 16th day in the movie, they said, "I'm so happy and thankful that I ... And I said, let me try that with meditation, because it's been working for all the little toys and little things I was manifesting in those 16 days. And that's what I did. I'm so happy and thankful that I enjoy meditating. I'm so happy and thankful that I'm good at meditating. And ever since that day, I've been great at meditating. And that helped me get a handle on what was going on up here. Now I just needed to know how to work it, reverse engineer the system, the ego, what it's saying. Now you got to work on how to shut the ego up, asking yourself certain questions. If you say I'm retired 10 times, the ego is going to say, no, you're not 10 times. But if you say, how would it feel to be retired? The ego has to shut up and let the subconscious honestly answer the question, and it would feel amazing. Now you just put out a great energy. Now you just put another drop of water into that flower pot. So it's like tricking the ego into shutting up was my next area of study. And that's been my biggest area of study since then.
Now, do you find that over time you learned how to dance with your ego rather than shutting it up? Because it is important. And there's no ego without we go, as a good dear friend of mine who's on the other side now said to me a couple of decades ago, which really made sense. Does that fit with what you found out?
You know, it's crazy. Up until about 3 days ago, I always saw the ego as an opponent that I had to find a way to get around or manipulate. Like I said, say things to shut the ego up long enough for you to sit in that, marinate. And this is how it would feel to be retired. A couple seconds later, the ego is still going to come in and say, well, you're still not going to do it. You're still not there. How many people your age have retired or whatever the situation is? So it's like, it's always been a tricking the ego type thing. And I think it was Sunday night. I was like, you know what? I'm going to celebrate the ego. And it's so crazy. I've never even thought to say anything like this before. Why would I celebrate the ego? It just came out of my mouth. And when it came out of my mouth, my brain automatically began to factor out reasons why I would celebrate the ego. And that's when I realized that voice that's always messing with you and saying things, and it's paranoid. That's what kept me alive as a cop, being paranoid. Making sure I called for backup, making sure I cleaned my gun when I needed to, making sure I was following the rules so I wouldn't get arrested for locking somebody up the wrong way or anything like that. So how we don't spend too much money, how we don't trip, we don't walk so fast, we don't drive, we don't take that. The ego is there warning you about stuff all day, and we hate it because it won't allow us to sit at Disneyland in our mind. Right. On an unlimited funded vacation. We can't even sit in that for 5 seconds before the ego says, you don't have that money. You know what it would take to do that. So we hate it for all the wrong that it does, but we're not celebrating all the good that it does. And so I've decided to celebrate that part of me, because the ego is a part of me. And for me to hate a part of me, thoughts become things, manifest another.
Exactly.
I'm hating a part of
it doesn't serve the purpose now, does it?
Nah. So I found a way to celebrate it. As far as dancing with it, I don't know if what we were doing before was a dance, you know, me tricking it into shutting up long enough to where I can enjoy that unlimited vacation. I don't know if you can consider that a tango, push-pull type thing. Tell me what you meant by dance. I'm curious now.
Well, granted,
if you dance with the ego, I want to know how you dance with the ego so I can use it.
Well, let me see if I can explain that a little bit. First of all, in the pushing and pulling of energy, that doesn't work, as you well know. It's the flow that we seek, which aligns attention, intention, and interaction, which is the thoughts becoming things, right? Now, from a ego standpoint, it's kind of like the right and left brain learning how to operate in functionality, right? The left brain, analytical thoughts, very materialistic, fears, projections, concerns, warnings, all that kind of stuff, where the right brain is going, oh, gosh, this is just such an amazing world, and what can I do with it? And gosh, look at this flower, and doesn't it smell great, right? And so then the two of those have to learn how to work together, which is, I believe it's the function of the corpus callosum, which is the membrane in between the two. It's the transceiver that transmits the neuro impulses between the two. Some might call it the mind's eye, right? In that way. So this is where the dance occurs, where you recognize that both of them are, in a sense, featuring two different sides of life, and then you learn how to blend those two together effectively in the dance. And it becomes such a first nature after a while, because you practice it. You know, the 5 P's are great: patience, perseverance, persistence, passion, and purpose, right? When you put those together with practice, which is the 6th unspoken P, that it all becomes real. And especially when you practice it regularly. That doesn't mean that the concerns go away for life, because you still have duties, responsibilities, things you need to take care of, and those are real. But you got to be able to be functional within that and look at, okay, what do I want my life to be? Who am I, first of all? What am I? What can I do? And where can I go? And who can I meet along the way? Right.
You
So
know,
this is,
I just want to cut in real quick. I think that people don't ask themselves that question on a regular basis, because they don't think that they think they know the answer. And even if they don't think the answer is going to serve a purpose.
right.
It's not going to get them more money. It's not going to get them that job, the promotion, the car that they want. It's not going to pay their rent. And so they just don't even want to ask that question, but they don't realize that asking that question is how you get out of all of that drama. The answers that will come. You can't ask yourself that question once or twice. You got to answer a lot of times and get the different answers and dissect them. But once you go down that rabbit hole and you find out more about you and you start to pursue that, start taking inspired action, that's when your life changes.
Oh yeah, you find all the burrows that are there that creates the community, right? And Einstein even said long ago, you can't solve problems with the same thinking that created them. So you've got to change your thinking and how you perceive things. And as you said, you ask the questions, you learn how to just be quiet, let the answers come. And they will, because that's how the system is designed.
Let me ask you this. You got to be able to tell the difference of the voices. You ask yourself a question, there's going to be a bunch of different sentences that come at you. Usually the first one is your intuition, that higher form of you, and the one you should listen to. But sometimes the second one is usually you. Like, let's say a woman passes by a window that has a $1,200 purse in it. Immediately she says, I should have that purse. That's her intuition. She should. Then she steps up and says, I do got to pay rent. And then the ego steps up with all the other reasons why she can't have it. And my thing is this: if she went in there and got it, listened to her intuition and got it, and felt wholeheartedly that it was a good purchase and she didn't feel bad about it, no kind of guilt later on, that money would come back to her. It would replace itself, or rent would get paid in some way, shape, or form where she was just good.
Right, because there was no resistance to flow.
Exactly. But if you get the person and you start worrying about rent, I shouldn't have done this, and maybe that's when you get slapped in the face. So don't go purchase the purse if you're not good at this, ladies. What I'm talking about is being able to identify the voices and listen to them. Don't skip that first one and go right to yours. Go with
and they'll resonate differently in your body too. The intuition resonates in the gut. And then the quality of that resonates in the heart. And then the choice as to what to do with it is the decisions you make in your head. And so it's an ancient indigenous philosophy actually called the 3-brain system. And the gut is the first brain, the heart's the second brain, and the head is the third brain. We tend to live above the shoulders and don't process anything in our body, which is an instrument we haven't learned how to tune, let alone play in concert.
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And these are all things that are built into us. I've found out through my own tests and others that I know that have been able to do the same. And you know, we have conversations about the similarities in the process. And it's kind of like the scientific method. The process is the same, the details are different. But as long as you work the process, you're going to get the results.
So when did you first learn about the law of attraction?
Um,
Or let me rephrase that. When did you first learn that your thoughts were creating your reality?
oh, I was pretty young. I would have really weird shit happen as a kid, just with um, innocent thoughts I would have about wondering if something could happen, right? And then I'd watch it unfold in front of me, and I'm like, whoa, right? And I never
Wow.
connected how my thoughts and that event were connected until later on, when I had my experience in college that I told you about earlier, and found myself in light and beyond. Well, once that happened, then I started looking at every kind of um, text, ancient text that gave some kind of indication as to what I
I
just
like that.
experienced, it, right? And so then I read the Vedas, the Rig Vedas, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, the Quran. I'd already read the Bible twice. And so I was looking for all this corollary information and corroboration of the experience I'd had to know that I wasn't freaking crazy with it, right? That it was actually something that was all part of a spiritual path. I just happened to have it at 18, where my psychiatrist that my parents sent me to revealed to me that most people don't have that kind of experience to their mid 40s, if they ever do.
Yeah.
And he advised me, because I was so young, he said, don't talk to people. They're not going to understand you. And that
That
was true.
sucks.
Now I'm a big mouth. I didn't keep my mouth shut, and it caused problems because I didn't pay attention to wise advice, right? That's since changed, but I've still had a very kind of a radical curiosity about life and how it works. And I'm willing to question everything, because everything's sacred, and yet nothing is sacred, right? Truth deserves the question. And if we're seeking that truth of ourselves and where we fit in, then we need to take that deep dive, and however far we can, even if it's to a molecular and biological genetic level, to see what our uh, predilections are, for lack of a better, right? What we're prone to do. Well, those are natural things that oftentimes are innocent, naive, and authentic, genuine, and usually helpful towards something, whether it's ourselves or others. And this is what I think the law of attraction revealed. However, because the mind is so powerful, it can also be used, like your CIA buddy, and what they used as far as remote viewing and things like that in the past, and how they had these um, small, for lack of a better, etheric forces, if you will, because they were able to work in the atmosphere, and look and peer, and even affect others because of their own prowess in using their minds. Now, that generally has some repercussions, because it's a pushing and pulling of energy, right? Whereas, you know, if you're pushing, as I mentioned before, that's going to cause problems, because that's the ego operating.
Mm-hmm.
It's your will towards other things and or people. Now, if you flip that and you look at, okay, now what can I do that helps others, or that kind of perspective, how can I show up and be who I am, rather than try to manipulate others? Just look for what is, and then acquiesce to it in order to serve it to the best of our capability, with the skill set that we have, right? This is part of what I think the law of attraction leads to, is understanding, yeah, we all have a purpose, and, you know, loosely fitting it, it's learning how to get along. But from that Vedantic standpoint of the unity consciousness, we each have an individuated form, which could be seen as a perfected form, fit, and function in the world if we were to fully acquiesce to it, submit to that
That would
process.
be that's the, like we said earlier, hopefully COVID shut everybody up long enough to where they're primed for this type of information, because before they were not.
Correct. They were okay with things because there wasn't the chaos, the disturbance. Their lives weren't, their livelihoods weren't threatened, and everything was kind of normal. Well, now with that obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration, it gave people a chance to go inside and examine themselves, which is behavioral mod. That's the natural effect that I don't think was considered by those who were pushing the narrative to get people to do so. And so now the repercussion of that is this awakened population that's beginning to seek their better function in the world, things that make them happy to do, as opposed to things that make them feel constricted or contrived or forced into doing something against their will, which is kind of where the live and let live philosophy comes in, and you know, the legal side.
I want to ask you something about that. Now, the powers to be, or whatever you want to call them, obviously they didn't overlook that. They, you know, they got teams of people. What would happen here? What would happen there? They've been doing this for a long time.
Oh yeah.
So if they allowed this all to happen, they obviously allowed that to happen, because that was the natural flow of things. I could have told you that was going to happen. I know the people up there knew. I was waiting for something like that to happen, actually. Like I said, I just want everybody to sit down and shut up.
Right.
So them allowing this phenomenon, whatever you want to call it, to happen, why would they allow it to happen? The only thing I could think of, and maybe it's what helps me sleep better at night, is they know that the shift is coming. The shift for the better. Maybe the older heads that were in control of the higher echelon are all dying off, and their grandkids are slightly hippie law of attraction and want to make things better in this way. I see the world making a shift. I see it changing for the better. The only way it'll change for the better is if the higher ups allow it to change for the better. Because let's face it, I mean, you could do what we do, and I'm working the way I work, and hopefully I can get everybody on board and have collective energy on a planet change. Like you said, New World Order. I had that same kind of vision that you had.
Right. But it's a
Exact
harmony
one.
among people and planet, not a population control Agenda 21 based, right? Then this is where I kind of differ with that, because again, you can't fix problems with the same thinking that fixed or that created them. So
But
these guys
that's when they'll fade out. Remember,
right,
you got to come in steps.
So they're thinking their best intentions, right, for saving humanity includes these particular actions because this is what they believe is necessary to take place. Well, those kinds don't necessarily have the deeper levels of consciousness and connectedness that the spiritual path allows to happen, because they're pushing and pulling energy constantly. Right?
I would say, what if that person is a spiritual person deep down inside? Because not every one of the Illuminati's family can be evil. Or whatever.
I'm not saying any of them are evil. I don't see it as that. I see it as a natural progression of planetary civilizations that have grown up with a command and control style that has been in place for millennia. So there's a certain point where that shift in consciousness has to take place, because we've built our world now where we're not threatened by things out of our control, for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's a woman in Russia named Valentina Morovina that is a Russian academician, and she put a dissertation together. It's on YouTube. It's called The Global Mutation in Humanity, and she's done I think it was a 10-year study of the discoveries of science that show that we are genetically evolving into a higher conscious society. en masse.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't have, the little bit, the division of labor doesn't necessarily have to change. Neither do the structures of our systems have to change. It's how we interact with them that changes, because we're coming from a different place in consciousness of seeking flow, order, natural order that examples what's built in to us that we haven't really understood yet, and how that reflects in the world through thoughts becoming things, because our minds and our energy is that powerful.
Yeah. Wait, hold up. You said, I just want to ask you, said something earlier, you don't think they're evil.
No,
I was just wondering,
I
like,
don't think anything is evil. I think that there are some evil behaviors in how they try to manipulate and the act of killing others. Of course, I
I
believe.
was about to say they've been doing
Yeah,
this for years. You don't consider
yeah,
that evil?
that is an evil act, but it's caused from an unsatisfied fear of loss or control of resources, right? Because that's what all the wars are about, are resources. It's not about people. It's about money and resources. And the West is trying to dominate that, and they've created a fictitious enemy in Putin, so that, and Russia in general, right? Putin just happens to be the face of Russia right now, but they've created a fictitious enemy to get everybody else to come on board and move that direction. And as a result, and it's really easy to do when you own the media. 8 families own all the media streams, and they're part of the Western agenda.
That's why
Oliver
I'm
Stone
like,
brings this out in his interview with Lex Fridman, and also his interviews with Putin, which are extremely insightful.
a whole bunch of evil acts repeatedly happening for years and years and years. For me, them some evil people. But
I
I
can
got you.
see
I
how
see what you're
that,
saying. I see
yeah,
what you're saying. But I think all of that is coming to an end.
I do too.
However it happens, if the powers of bees if the person they're handing the keys over to is secretly a spiritual person, and they want to hand the keys back to us as a whole and change the world, whatever happens, I know it's happening now. It's going to happen in my time.
Well,
I
thoughts
know it.
become things. I know it's going to happen in my time, because I gave my life to understand that, right? And so that's the one thing that I base my life on, because I gave my life up in order to know it. And what's happening is, like, perfect example, you and I are talking about this, we're in agreement, where 2 or more are gathered, there I am also, right? Doesn't necessarily have to do with Christianity or Jesus teachings. That's just the universal law, right?
It's funny. I had researchers, well, not researchers. I had people of a bunch of different religions go into their Bibles, so to speak, and take out everything that couldn't be proven in court right now. And all of them were in agreement with a couple set foundational rules. And it just so happened to be like perfectly aligned with the law of attraction with some other stuff. The law of attraction is like the cherry on top of the cake.
Right.
But, the other cake has layers and frosting and jimmies and all that other stuff. So there's other things involved. But that's when I got that all together. All the different religions, what they have in common. Law of attraction, even like atheists, their typical beliefs and stuff like that. And I formulated that. And that is what neo-positivity was. It eventually became a stage name, but that originally neo-positivity was a way of being, like a philosophy, and it was a collection of that exactly right there. And that was like 13, 14 years ago. And ever since then, I've just been trying to perfect it, just interviewing one person at a time. And now, as you mentioned earlier, I throw summits where I interview 6 people at a time, because 2 people is great. We birth new ideas. We bounce ideas off each other and birth new ones. But 6 people is obviously better.
Yeah.
More
6 heads are better than
information.
2, right? 2 are better than 1, but 6 are better than 2. And especially if you can have an open, authentic conversation featuring deep questions.
Here it is. Check this out. Each speaker, because I don't have much time, each speaker gets 30 minutes to speak, right? But the first 5 minutes is they answer two questions. How do you use the law of attraction in your day-to-day? Like, what are your practices, affirmations? What do you do? And what has it done for you? That's the first 5 minutes. The next 25 minutes is questions from the audience. I don't want no rehearsed speech that you give at universities. No, you're going to answer his question on the fly.
Right.
Because that's how you get the
That's
authentic
flow.
answers out of people. So that I consider it a nice campfire atmosphere where we're just talking back and forth about the law of attraction. That's how my summits flow. So it's funny that you said that.
Sure. Well, congruent, right? Synchronistic maybe. So what do you think from the phrase live and let live in comparison to that?
I mean, like, if I was trying to control my son's movements, it's like, all right, just, live and let live. You know what I mean? Live my life and let him live his. Is that what you mean?
That's one of the aspects. So this is what now live and let live is also it's a global peace movement, and it's set up on a couple of premises. It was actually founded by a Attorneys for Freedom law firm here in Chandler, Arizona, and the precepts of live and let live are legal and moral. The legal side of it is the live side, which means don't be an aggressor. That's really the core of everything. The golden rule, don't be an aggressor, right? And that is a way for us to assess and adjust or calibrate laws to allow freedom to be, right? And then the let live side of it is a moral principle, and it's simply stated as just be a good human. Everybody's got a different idea of what a good human is, depending on the level of functionality and interaction in their communities, whether they're a leader or just a community member, right? But there's still certain things that you can do, aspirations you can have to be a good human, and then evolve from there. So this gives that foundational precept of how to then deal with the rest of things in order to make the world a better place. Because first of all, you're dealing with the very crux of what allows it to be kind of a nasty place sometimes in the war, and that governments had the ability to aggress. At this point in our civilization, why do we do that? We ought to be doing just the opposite of learning how to work together, right? We are one planet, one people, one earth, one air, one body of water, even though it's connected and we call it different oceans.
It's like we can't get started because someone's always stirring a pot. And occasionally they stir it harder with some George Floyd type, stuff.
So how do you respond to those kinds of things and offering other ways to see situations and move through them in a more positive fashion with a better outcome?
I say it like this. My son was messing up in school, and I couldn't get him to do right. And someone asked me about him. Hey, how's your son doing? And I noticed that every time someone asked me that, my first words were, oh, this boy, let me tell you what he did And I said, now, as far as thoughts become things, what am I contributing to this? I'm a huge fan of collective energy. The Philadelphia Eagles don't drop not one pass in practice, but when they get in the game, they do exactly what the masses expect them to do great and lose in the end. And so going back to my son, it took me looking at an old email from 5th grade from his teacher. He was in like 9th grade at the time. 5th grade. And I appreciate it. It was a nice email. He's doing great. He's improving, And I said, let me sit in that. Let me marinate on how it felt. And every time I did that, he would start doing good in school for a little while. And then I'd forget to do it for a couple of months, and his report card would be messing up. And then I'd go back to it, and it would work every time. So using thoughts become things to change the world. If someone tell me that a cop killed somebody in Camden, New Jersey, or I'd be shocked if it was Camden, but if it was somewhere else, I'd be like, I wouldn't be surprised. I expected that to happen. That's the normal. I don't know why George Floyd made the news. I was a cop in Camden, New Jersey, and there was white cops killing black people while they were running away empty-handed all the time. Never made the news. never made the news, and it happens everywhere all the time. So why that would make the news, I don't know. But that being said, I expect, sadly enough, I expect things like that to happen. I expect that from our country. I expect that from our police officers, because I work with a bunch of those police officers. So I'm contributing to that negatively. And the underlying foundation of every single thought I have, 60 to 70,000 thoughts on average per day per person. And I'm contributing to that negatively. And I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to see the world as a better place so I can manifest the world as a better place. But I'm a work in progress when it comes to that,
Oh, we all are.
especially when I keep seeing these things happen around me. I'm like, oh my goodness. And it's not even like, I don't watch the news. So when people were talking about such and such subject, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So what I'm seeing and what has me still in a negative headspace about the world is what I'm seeing now. How I'm seeing people treated now in the streets when I'm out there. I'm not nowhere near the hood now. I live in Florida. I'm living good, got land, got a little trailer, I got a golf cart, but it's still, I know that if I get pulled over on my golf cart, it's going to be a problem.
So let me ask you this then, because you've already referenced your ability to manage your thoughts and how you're contributing to the less than healthy side of things, let's say. How do you recognize the thoughts when they're happening and shift them on the fly? Or do you? Or you just watch the negativity progress for a little bit before you're like, that's enough?
In my research over the past 14 years, I've always searched for physical indicators. That's why I actually love like stones, like quartz crystals and stuff like that. I look for physical indicators to feel things. I noticed that there's a little knot in your throat. I actually just did a video about this 2 days ago. There's a little knot in your chest, I mean. And when you lie to yourself or feel bad about something, it kind of goes down towards your gut. And when you're happy, and in my mind, it turns kind of red. And when you're happy, it goes up. You feel it when you smile, it goes up. When you're laughing, it's way up here and it kind of turns white in my mind. That knot right there is a great indicator and a waker upper to me when I catch myself in those headspaces. I feel that. I feel, and for me, because I live a very cushy life, I'm not used to the knot being down here. So when it's here, when it's down there, I'm in, what is going on? Why am I feeling this feeling? Oh, I was just thinking that thought. Like everything around me is cool. I was just thinking that thought. Let me get out of that. In addition to that, another little secret I learned from the movie The Secret was to manifest little clicks, dings, something falls, something dings, and use those as like a reminder. I'm like, when I hear something, I hear something, like I may hear things and I just brush it off. But when I hear it and I'm like, ooh, that's a reminder. What was I just thinking? I was usually thinking a negative scenario.
Right. Now, those are the serendipitous synchronicities that we often just brush right past.
Yes,
right.
We do.
And these are things that I learned as a kid. Right? I started paying attention to that. So The Secret was like a validation of everything I already knew. It's like about time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You guys put something together and shared it with the world that gives them some kind of indication as to the power that they really have.
Exactly.
And we don't understand that power yet or how effective it can be because we're still trying to figure it out. Now, the reason I asked you a question is how do you recognize that? What do you do? And how do you manage your mind in the process? Is that I've gotten very acutely aware of my thoughts. And I'll even, and patterns, to the point where even in the kitchen in the morning, I will purposely change my pattern just to adjust it. And for no reason whatsoever, other than to adjust the pattern, right? In my thinking, though, when I start going down a less than positive path about anything, I'll generally pick it up within a few seconds. And then if it's a strong feeling, I will go immediately to just thinking I, right? And breathing in I and out I, and just have this high, it's like a high pitched frequency that the I becomes, and it eliminates that path that I was on and allows me to stop and choose which path I desire rather than one that I just fell into because I wasn't being aware enough to be positive about what I was doing.
Fear. I use fear.
Mm.
I am 100%, I don't want to say terrified, but I'll say it anyway. Terrified of having a negative thought because I know what it's doing to my future. In my mind, every neutral or negative thought is taking food off my table, taking money off my table. And I always say both of those. Food off my table because I think of my kids. So I
Mhm.
need to be vigilant for them, and money off my table because I like money and everybody like money because that's what pays for food, you know?
Right.
So when I'm in those headspaces, if a scenario comes, I've conditioned my mind through years of practice, years of muscle memory building to wake up sooner than later. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not watering that seed. And that's my whole thing. I'm not watering that seed. I love what you said about doing a pattern adjustment, just shifting, just to get better at shifting. Because at the end of the day, the more you shift, the better you get at shifting.
Right.
And so that's an awesome thing I never even thought to strengthen. But the more you wake up throughout the day to do anything, stop and smell the roses, take a deep breath, meditate for a couple of seconds, the more you wake up, the better you get at waking up. So you first work on that. And then after you start waking up more often, like you're just walking and all of a sudden you're not thinking like, I'm back in the room. Whoa. Now take advantage and do something.
I
Do
would
an
even,
affirmation like or yes, just say yes 10 times. No matter what mood you're in, by the
doesn't
third
matter.
time you say it, you'll be smiling. And by the sixth or seventh time you say it, your brain will be throwing at you reasons to say yes.
Mhm.
And that's what you want. When your brain is throwing something at you, that means the ego has to shut up and let you live in that moment. Let the subconscious co-sign with that moment. And it just feels all good. Another way of tricking the ego. Like there's a bunch of different ways to do it. That's
Sure.
been like my main area of focus for a while, but
So let me go
yeah.
back to your mention of your fear of the negative thoughts. And I would say, well, I had a friend of mine that mixed blood Cherokee, one of the guys that I interviewed early on in my previous One World back in the 90s. And he was a proponent of fear, meaning false evidence appearing real. And what we seek to do is free every anxious reaction. Right.
I
And
like
my
that.
response to him is, yeah, but most of the time we just want to F everything and run. Right. So what we do, though, is by focusing on the fear, whether it's do or do not, the mind doesn't pay attention to that. It pays attention to the subject material and produces that. It reflects that in the outer world to us. So if we're going to fear something, why not fear success?
I would
Right?
never
Because
fear success. I'm gonna go. I don't.
ultimately you're going to produce that because that's your obsession, your thoughts about success. And then you recognize
I see what
as
you're
it's
saying.
coming, those fears that you thought you had about it will be the keys to actually having it. Right? Those are the doors that you walk through.
That's
And
pretty
love,
dope. That's pretty
yeah.
dope. I never thought about that.
Well,
I when I was saying fear, I wasn't taking. I was going. I was using actual fear because I know that if I try to change my patterns for eating, I mean, how many diets have I been on? Not diets because I never really dieted, but or once I did. But how many different eating regimens have I been on in my life? A lot. I was an athlete. Well, I still am an athlete, but da. So and none of them stuck.
mhm,
However, I know not to walk down that dark alley anymore because people have been getting robbed. I'm not going down. It's done.
mhm.
Instant change in a pattern that's been going on my entire life. Always been taking that alley. So I know fear, the one thing that can make people change. And I don't really fear much. Like if I get pulled over, the most thing I could possibly fear is getting pulled over. And I do fear getting pulled over. Not
Yeah.
because the cop is going to shoot me. I'm
Unfortunately, we still have
uh,
racial profiling in this country.
yeah, but I'm honestly, I'm confident enough to say I'm going to win in any fight I get into with any cop. By the time his supervisor gets there or his backup gets there, he will be handcuffed. And I'll be sitting there like, yo, I don't want no beef. This guy took it too far. I'm pretty confident now. I've been in
Right.
martial arts my
Right.
whole life. So I don't fear that part of getting pulled
Well, and
over.
you've been in that realm, so you know how to handle people in that
Exactly.
realm.
What I fear about getting pulled over, the only thing I fear about getting pulled over, and the only thing I really fear is them going in my pockets. That ticket's going to cost $400, you know? And so that loss is what, just like the dinner table,
Mhm.
taking food off the table. And so it's more of a trigger to wake me up
Well,
to
maybe you ought
what
to think
I'm
of moving to a
thinking.
state with recreational, right? So
that ain't gonna help nothing. That ain't gonna help nothing. No, so yeah, so it's like you use that. It's not going anywhere. It's a great way to make you change immediately. And because I was taking clients at one point when I first moved to Tampa 3 years ago. And that's how I would instill, because I give them all these great mental exercises, all these great things they can do. They're not doing them. They're not disciplined enough to do them. But when I make them fear their negative thoughts, that's when they wake up to them. That's when they start changing.
That's generally been the consistent motivator, even back when the Bible, let's look at that for a moment, the canonization of the Bible in Constantinople, the Council of Nicaea. It was done to bridge church and state so that Constantine could rule with an iron fist and say, okay, you're going to believe this under fear of death. And so we've had that fear of death if we don't behave, or adhere to the Ten Commandments, or let's say, but it was much worse than that then. Not so much now, although there are still people killing in the name of God. And why the heck would you want to do that anyway?
And so that's the thing. Something that's been around that long and it's manipulated so much and is still continuing to manipulate the way people think.
Until now.
I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use that to my advantage to wake me up to do more mental exercises today. Because remember to do these exercises is the hardest part. With life coming at you a mile a minute, stopping to wake up to smell the roses. That's why I said practice it and get good at it, because it's discipline. Not easy.
It's like any master of any art, it takes discipline.
And so I'm going to use the one thing I know that has manipulated minds in the biggest way in all times. I'm going to use that to my advantage.
Sure.
So when I say fear, that's what I mean. I love the whole false evidence appearing real thing. And I like the second thing you said. Free every what?
Free every anxious reaction.
I can't read my own chicken scratch.
And so the anxiety oftentimes, let's return to the indigenous philosophy of the three brains, the anxiety that you feel in your gut when you're in an unknown situation that's unpredictable and you have no clue what's going to be happening, but you feel this vibration in your gut. And the tendency is to perceive that as anxiety, that there's something around that's going to, that gives you reason to have some kind of fear, right? But the same sensation can also be interpreted as anticipation, that something cool is there still from the unknown side, right? Because you're not used to it, but there's this event that's about to happen that is going to give you some benefit. Now, those are two ways of perceiving the same sensation. And what kind of result might you have by focusing on either one of them?
That's crazy. As you're talking, I think I'm numb to that now, that feeling. Just from like being a cop in the most dangerous city in America, every house I walked into was like threat, know? And I've tried to wean myself off of that thinking. When I first moved to Florida, my flight instructor invited me over his house. He offered me a glass of lemonade and I didn't drink it. I was like, why is he offering me? Why does he want me to go in his house? Why is he offering me lemonade? Did he do something to it? Like, I've seen that in the movies, but they don't do that. And I've never seen nobody actually offer somebody a glass of lemonade or iced tea in my life. So yeah, I didn't drink it. And I told him that and he laughed at me. But so for me trying to shift out of that, but just hearing you say that, I'm like, I don't feel uncomfortable in situations anymore. I'm always in a situation where I'm the only Black guy in the room. Always, everywhere I go. I'm so used to that. And being, plus all the cop things, it's just like, I don't think I feel that anymore. Now I'm looking for situations where I would feel that.
Well, and I've had just the opposite occur. I've been the only white guy in a room.
That's an uncomfortable feeling too.
Right. And I had a very unique experience with the Indian School Park here in Phoenix when it was under development in the very beginning. The property was a Phoenix Indian High School at one point. It had been a what do they call them? Anyway, it was built in 1890 as a camp for westernizing Indian children.
Okay.
And so it had gone through, I mean, it was a horrific place, right? And then it turned into an Indian high school later in the 1930s. And in 1990, it closed because of the asbestos, and it would cost too much to do an asbestos removal. So they just shut it down. Well, then the Barron Collier Corporation out of Florida traded the Bureau of Interior 100,000 acres for that property in order to trade 75 acres of that 125 acre parcel to the city of Phoenix for 2 blocks of downtown so that they could build, right? Well, in the process, the park, there was a Phoenix Indian School Preservation Coalition that was made up of 18 of 21 tribes in Arizona that wanted to have their say in how that park was built so that it honored the historical traditions as opposed to just gloss over them and the real history of what happened. So here's the, and I had one of the co-chairs I interviewed as a guest on my early One World, and she calls me up and said, "Hey, Zen, I think there's something you'd be interested in. Could you please come over to the house and we've got a meeting. Would you attend?" And so I did. And I was one of 3 white guys there with probably 40 Native Americans that from all the different tribes. And I actually became, I call it the token white boy, because I was the one that ended up writing up their proposal and sharing it with the mayor and his staff and the City of Phoenix Parks and Recs Planning Commission and subcommittee, and was there throughout the entire process of getting the specific plan put together and accepted. Man, what a wonderful experience that was, and yet it felt so uncomfortable to begin with because of that unfamiliarity, right? Yeah. And then as I began just showing up and continuing to show up, what was funny was that the day that I presented the paperwork to the mayor and his staff, that we were in a collective meeting, and I was in the audience, and Jean Chaudhuri was the co-chair. She'd asked me to present it. And once I did, then after the meeting broke up, I stood at the door to face everyone so that they could look at me in the eyes on the way out, right? I don't know why I did it. I just felt like that was the appropriate thing to do. And so I did it because Jean had asked me to present it, and I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that I was on their side, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was one Native woman that looks at me in the eyes and says, "You know, you really need to let us do this." And I explained that Jean had asked me to present it. Well, what was funny is the next day we had a meeting at ASU of the coalition, and she stood up and asked if we could use that document as a working document for their presentation. And that was just so humbling to me to have that switch from one attitude to the other.
There you go. You followed your gut, came up with a masterpiece, and earned the hearts.
Right.
That's the formula right there.
And that's an example of what others can do in their own communities to just stand up and be one of the voices of sanity.
And you know what? Because community meetings are usually once a month, start online.
Yeah.
Start online. Be the voice. People posting on Facebook. That's why I don't scroll down on Facebook. I never scroll down, because this person's talking about their husband cheating on them. This person's talking about their car breaking down. This person's talking about how their boss is treating them like dirt. And all of their bosses has always treated them like dirt at every job they've ever had. I'm good. I don't really, that's the same reason I don't watch the news. So if you're going to post something, think about fear. Okay. Collective energy. Everybody on Facebook, let's say you got 1,000 Facebook friends and you post on there that your boss hates you. Everybody, all 1,000 of those people now have it in their mind, and they're watering the seed, manifesting the future about you and how your boss hates you. You're contributing to that with every post dramatically. And the more people that are on your page, the worse it's getting. So push out the good, keep the bad to yourself. It's personal anyway, you know, and watch the shift. Watch some things shift, and then go to neopositivity.com.
Yeah. So in the process now, and social media is a great example of it. Initially, did you interact with those to kind of nudge them into maybe a different viewpoint of their situation at all? or did you just kind of ignore it?
We talking about my first Facebook post or when I first heard about the law of attraction?
No, in your interactions with Facebook, you're saying you don't scroll down anymore. All right. So when you used to scroll down, did you interact with those people to try in any way to um, get them to subtly change their view in
No,
some way?
I didn't know about the law of attraction at the time.
Okay.
So if I would just keep scrolling past it, like, nope, not looking at that. Nope, not looking at that. Like people, like females showing pictures with a bruised eye. Nope, you should have left him 10 years ago with
Right.
the first 12 bruised eyes. You know, so I would just scroll past stuff like that before. But once I got into the law of attraction, I immediately stopped watching some TV shows because I noticed that I would watch a show and then later on that night, I'd be running myself in that scenario. And I'm
Mm,
like, I don't want to be in that scenario. I'm about to go to work and chase bad guys down alleyways all night. I don't want to be in a shootout scenario because I watched the shootout because I was watching the movie SWAT or
right.
whatever it is. And so that right there kind of shaped everything. I took that approach with everything. If I don't want to be thinking about it, so I just that's how I went. I stopped scrolling on Facebook as soon as I learned about the law of attraction.
Interesting. I kind of, for a while, um, because I'm just that way, I want to help everybody. And so I would interact with those that seem to be asking for help, not just complaining, right? The complainers, you're not going to change them at all, because they're just going to continue to complain. If you do give them cause to not complain about something, they'll turn around and find something else. And they've got a litany of things.
I've never seen anyone asking for help though.
Well, I have.
Maybe it's just because of the East Coast. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's the Upper East
That could
Coast
be,
and the New York, Philadelphia area. I've always said Jersey is blanketed with the
well,
negativity
you
of
guys are
Philadelphia and New
always,
York.
that whole East Coast area. And this is interesting because I've traveled the States and I've seen the different ways different populations act towards each other in different locations in the country. And it's just freaking amazing of the
Yeah.
variety. East Coast is really, tight and fast, and you think they're not listening to each other, but they're listening intently, and yet they're bantering like there's no end to tomorrow. And you go to California and everybody's just kind of laid back and soft spoken, and then Hawaii is like, um, so those kinds of things, I suppose, we don't often take into consideration, especially now that we've got a diverse population from those locations that have moved all over the country.
Yeah, everything's mixed. It is scrambled, but it's still certain places are certain places. Florida was so different. I just moved down here 3 years, 38 years in New Jersey in the same county. I just moved down here to be 3 years in August. Florida was so different. I didn't know people like this existed. My
Mhm.
dad's lived in Florida for 5 years, and I visit him 3 or 4 times a year. And I thought I knew what Florida was about, but it wasn't till I moved down here.
So you had a glass of lemonade.
Yes, it's a different quality of people. They want to help. One time I was driving this piece of crap truck and it broke down. I was like, what the hell am I gonna do? And I looked out the window and there was people coming from everywhere to help push the car off the road. Now I was at an intersection, so that kind of makes sense. And it
Sure.
was a Nissan Armada, a big truck.
Get
So
you
they
out of
knew
the
I
way
would
so that
need help.
everybody could move.
Everybody stayed. 2, 3 seconds later, they're all on the phone with their cousin or their uncle or mechanic they know, and they're diagnosing my car. None of that would have happened north of Virginia. So it's like this further south I've gotten, it's just a nicer quality, trustworthy, open type people. I absolutely love, living in Florida. So, but I base what kind of community I'm in by this shirt. I always have a shirt on that says thoughts become things. I got a million of them. Always, everywhere I go, I have this shirt on. If I'm in California, 7, 8, 9 people a day will say, I love your shirt, or my parents taught me that. If I'm in Florida, 3 to 4. Jersey, 0.
Right.
So I kind of gauge it off of what people say, how many people say something about, oh man, I love your shirt. So yeah, it's different cultures. Definitely adjust. And I like that you're seasoned and traveled. I'm gonna get my way there soon.
Hmm.
I think I'm a traveler deep down inside.
Well, had the opportunity. A friend of mine called up, said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was in between positions, and I'm like, "Nothing. Why?" And he says, "You want to go on the road?" And I'm like, "Yeah," without even the
Yeah, yep.
why or what are we going to do, right? It's just like, there's an old friend. We worked together for the Cardinals doing merchandise in the early aughts, and so he was working for children's theater shows and traveling the country and doing front of house merch. And he said, "Hey, they need a um, mature guys at front of house dealing with grandmas and moms and little kids and people that seem trustworthy, right?" And so I said, "Wow, that sounds great." So we toured the country, played a lot of golf, had a lot of fun, and experienced a lot of different American cultures. It's like one of the things I learned on the show that I was doing early on. People speak English, but they often talk a different language than each other. They speak, and another good friend who is alternative dispute resolution association president at one time. He's also a black belt in Aikido and instructor. He says, there really is no conflict. What there is miscommunication. And why that is that the two parties, for instance, come to the table with two different dictionaries, and they speak and listen from their dictionary without understanding a word of the others.
Mm-hmm.
And so
and then something seems contradictory in there.
Right, because
Elevate the levels.
Yeah. So then the Covey's fifth habit, right? Seek to understand before being understood. So you take the time to understand the other person's dictionary, which means you can then speak to them in their language.
And attached to that, they see that you took time to learn their language. That softens every sentence.
Consideration and compassion for one another.
No one cares about I forget the saying, no one cares about you until you care about them, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's Zig or Dale Carnegie or Earl Nightingale or one of those guys way back when.
Like that. But it is so true. I've been in a ton of networking events when I first moved to Tampa, and I have meaningful conversations with people, and they never forget that. And it's just a different feel from just, hey, yeah, I'm an insurance guy,
Right.
So yeah, get to know people, get emotionally attached and involved, and that person will be thinking about you when they're in a room with such and such CEO of the job that you want to get. That's how it
Business and
happens.
marketing is about authentic conversations. The ditch the pitch, right? You don't need to pitch. Be authentic. Show that you want to build a relationship, and the rest will take care of itself.
I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but do you know what BNI is?
Yes.
Yeah. See, when I first moved down, that was the last networking event I went to. Someone took me to a BNI chapter, and it was the #1 chapter in Tampa, and I became their life coach for a year. So, and I learned a lot. In BNI about business and stuff like that. But I was always that person anyway. I always had deep conversations with people.
I was involved with a lot of different networking groups here in Phoenix for quite some time, and it seemed far too often that there were energetic hooks, that people weren't paying attention to being authentic and developing relationships. They were just looking for business, and you were a dollar sign that they wanted to, and that just didn't feel right. So I stopped going. And I know of several older friends that felt the same way about things. I just happened to be able to learn it a little younger. Not to say that networking meetings aren't great. You can't have, great conversations and things like that, because that's the step beyond feeling
just don't go there looking for that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Go there with no
looking
expectations. Just looking for those people that you connect with. You see somebody across the room that you meet eye to eye for just an instant. Well, that's an indication you need to go talk to them, because that's a direct connection that you've just had.
And you know what I'll say? And I know that this has happened to you too. One thing I started to notice, every networking event I went to, I would walk into the room and I'd immediately spot like 4 people. By the end of the night, us 5 were sitting in the corner talking about the law of attraction or spirituality or something. I didn't go up to them right away, but by the end of the night, we were all sitting in the corner talking about spirituality.
Now, why is that? Why do you think that happened?
I think like attracts like. Deep down inside, that that part of me and you when we were younger and we were looking for someone else like us, when I see that person, I know that person.
Mm-hmm.
We are all one, but I am emotionally, I guess, my vibration is more similar to theirs and yours than someone who's not very spiritual. And I
Right.
can feel it. I pick it up. And by the end of the night, the magnetics have done what they do.
Right.
They pulled together.
Which is the
And
application of universal law, that your intent to begin with, I'm going to venture to say, well, rather than venturing to say, when you notice that, what are you thinking as far as your intentions toward them? Just
first couple ones, because I had never been to a networking event before. And this was when I was 38. I've been wielding the law of attraction like a master since I was 28. You know, so for 10 years, I've been in the law of attraction game, but I didn't notice what was happening. It wasn't until I went to my first networking event, I saw it happen, figured it was it was just whatever coincidence, that I ended up with those same people. The next one I went to 28 networking events in 1 month. I was killing, like I was hitting 3 a night. I didn't know anyone when I moved down here, and my whole
that's
life,
the way to get to know
38,
people quick, right?
yeah, 38 years in Jersey, I knew everyone, every street. And this was the first time I was in a situation where I didn't know anyone. So I was like, I'm just going to hit as many as I can. And so the second and third time it happened, I was like, all right, this is getting a little freaky. Am I manifesting this or what? And then I looked at the subject content, and I was like, some people are talking about yoga, some people are talking about stones, but we're all spiritual. And that's what's bringing us together. We're not doing business. If we were all brought together to start a company, that's not what happened. So, that was not what was meant to happen. We were brought together for a different reason. And that's when I started to put it together. After like maybe the third or fourth event, I was like, this is happening every time. And then it just did. And so I was like, it's law of attraction, baby. It did it again, like-minded people. And we connect. And, we're still friends on Facebook. Take a
Right.
couple pictures. And then the thing about it is, this person's a realtor and I'm a life coach. We start talking. Next thing you know, our kids are best friends. We live right up the street from each other. My child didn't have no one to play with before that, especially with COVID and, us being paranoid. Now he's got a friend. So out of this, me entertaining the conversation on a deeper level, as opposed to, no, I don't need a realtor, so let me go talk to the plumber. I need one of those. It led to my son being happier every day, and that didn't happen, but I'm just saying that would have been a great,
Right.
stuff like that is what happens when you open, as opposed to going in, okay, this person's name tag says they're a realtor. I don't really need a realtor. I'll talk for 5 minutes and move on to the next person. I could have went into it like that. That's not me.
Right.
Don't let that be you, because you could be missing out on opportunity.
Strangers are friends you haven't met yet.
I love
Now,
that.
when you're in that process and you're feeling your way through it, and this reflects on what we just talked about, the hook in the networking meetings, which kind of turns people off to them. And oftentimes they miss, for me personally, you miss things that you could have had because you chose not to show up anyway, right? Because you just got tired of that sense. Well, back to your statement of we're all one, right? We've got this big tapestry, we're all threads in it, but those threads don't have to be right next to each other. What you're looking for is those ones that are right next to you, so that you can feel that the resonance with them, because you're so similar. You may have different skill sets or different professions, but there's a certain element of you that's very much like the other person. And as I said earlier, I'm another you, right? And when we see people like that, we're going to see more of it.
I like the tuning fork analogy.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all just tuning forks, and there's 20 of us in the room at a networking event, and there's 3 other tuning forks that are vibrating at my frequency, any 2 things that vibrate at the same frequency will naturally pull towards each other. It just is what it is. So that's how I love that.
I do too. And it takes an awareness of that. And oftentimes, now, do you find that in the process of it, that that unknown quality becomes a little disconcerting at times, or how, as it might, because we're always dealing with the unknown, right? And moving into situations, how do you deal with that from a thoughts become things perspective? And what do you experience as a result of your awareness of it, and then moving through it in the way that you do. Does that make sense?
Excuse me. Yeah, there we go. I have an ability, I've developed this ability to just before a situation, no matter what it is, if I'm about to shake your hand before this podcast, before a phone call, just stop real quick. I've developed my brain to do that. Just stop, not every time, but
Mhm.
stop real quick, see how I want to go, this situation to go, and then act like it already happened like that. So like when you see me go live, just before I hit record, you'll see me have a big smile. That's
Yeah.
me telling myself, yo, that went great. And then I do this thing where I bring in the watcher, this exercise I have called the watcher. It's amazing. Those two things are what I do to set myself on the right path. And they usually come just in time where the ego was about to say, oh, I hope this goes right. It could go wrong in these different ways, and so I'm basically replacing that voice. A lot of times right before I go on stage, I love being on stage. It's where I'm at home.
Yeah.
But sometimes right before I go on stage, my heart will start beating real fast to
Oh,
the point
sure.
where I'm like starting to breathe real fast. And I'm like, bruh, like, what are you doing? Like, that's
Take a
not
chill
me.
pill. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm about to go out there and nail this. As soon as I step on stage, my heart is going to go back to normal and I'm just going to be me and I'm going to kill it. Why are you doing this right now? And I kind of like laugh at myself, like, come on, man. Like, and then so I'll take deep breath or I hold my breath to feel like it slows my heart down a little bit. It's just like little things like that sometimes they pop up and you just got to have ways to deal with them.
Sure. Now, do you think that is an intrinsic aspect of wanting to be in integrity and authentic, and that moment there's a question of your ability to be there in your performance?
I think for me, that happens particularly in situations where I could forget something. Like now I work with PowerPoints. So if I forget something, it's right on the screen behind me. Like I go off on a tangent into 3 subjects and I forget what the first one was. I look back and I'm good.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So, but if I have a 4-hour thing where I have to memorize it, that kind of freaks me out sometimes,
Sure. But again, that's what I'm talking about. That's the integrity side of it, where you've got all your ducks in a line and you go up and you give your best. And more often than not, that initial concern, once you step on stage, it just disappears because you're in the flow at that point, because you turn on, you're getting the audience feedback, and as a musician and even a speaker, that audience feedback is just it's ineffable.
When I talk about that, I've spoken about many different things on many different occasions, but when I talk about the law of attraction, when I go on stage, the clap that I get comes with love. It sounds the same as a clap I would get talking about anything else. You hear the noise and there's a lot of it, but somehow this one comes with love, an abundance of love. Everyone knows I'm in that room trying to make their lives better, not today, but for the rest of their lives, and give them something that they're going to share with their kids, which makes them kids have great lives. And that's what everybody who has kids wants. So I can feel that coming from them. And it's lightning.
Yeah.
It's addictive.
It is. And it drives you to your best too. And sometimes, I know for me, in reflecting the audience, there's stuff that I haven't prepared. No way I could have, because the moment didn't offer itself to me, but the willingness to be on stage and vulnerable allows whatever it is necessary to come out my mouth.
That's why I like live streaming.
Yeah.
That's as authentic as I can get. There's no rewind. You're getting this.
Right. Well, these two, I don't do any post edits. I just do an intro and an extra exit, and that's it. It's all raw and real.
But
purposely.
I mean, if you did all of a sudden blurt out something crazy, you have the ability to edit it.
I wouldn't.
Live stream, you don't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, like if your ceiling fan just fell on you and you cut your head, you'd be like, all right, listen, I'm gonna cut, I gotta go to the hospital real quick. I'm gonna cut the rest of this out and edit it.
Right. Right.
With a live stream, everybody in the world saw that, you know, so it's like, it's a different beast.
It is.
And I
And
love
I
it.
learned it early with my show that I did. It was public access. Did it in a public access studio, which was a full-blown production, television production studio. 2 cameras, 3
Nice.
chip, control booth, switcher, graphics, A/B roll, all that kind of stuff. And we were limited on the time frame, so it was live to tape. Every show from the get-go. When I first started, man, I was scared like you would not believe, because I wanted to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
So it was just really tight, and you could tell it. And then about the 4th or 5th show, I started, getting more comfortable, because it was just conversations, and I'm great at conversations. And then I used Zendor as a subheading to my real name, which was kind of a door to what is. And I'll be darned if after about the 6th show, one of the guys on the set called me Zen, and it just cascaded from there. And I've worn the moniker proudly ever since. And
That
of
is.
course, it has its challenges, because people expect me to be that way.
I actually thought that was your name.
Well, it is, but from a different perspective. Being orphan and adopted, I've always had the question of who am I? And summer of '88, a friend of mine and I were talking after a full moon meditation, and our conversation was deep. And then we had a moment of stillness, right? And so I closed my eyes, I went inside, and I asked the question, who am I? And I heard his chair move. I turned to look at him. First words out of his mouth, "You are Zendor." And at the same instant, you're probably familiar with what second sight is. My second sight kicks on. Now, sometimes it kicks on eyes open, eyes closed, doesn't really matter. You still see stuff, right? So I see this huge stone arch doorway cast on the starscape, and I see a thick wooden door slowly opening toward me, and I hear door to what is. And I'm thinking, well, what the hell, gosh, what do you do with that, right? So I shared with him what had happened, and then I put it on the shelf. I didn't share it with anybody else, because it was just too freaking weird. And then I decided to use Zendor as a subheading. My given name's Bruce. So on my show, and you'll see this on YouTube if you ever look at the original videos. And so under Bruce Benefiel, my subheading was Zendor in quotes. And so that kind of gave I thought I'll just throw it out there, see what happens, right? And then Zen came out of it, and the rest is history. It's been an interesting process, and my life has been so full of, it's been like a magical mystery tour, much the same as yours has been since you found the law of attraction, began to put those points of order in line, right? Now, do you
It's funny?
find, yeah,
Real quick before you say that, 'cause I'm gonna forget. I didn't know this. I never thought about it until I'd say a couple of years ago. My first name, Nehemiah, broken down. Neo means first, or I'm sorry, Neo means new,
right,
and Maya means beginning. So I'm like, yeah, like I've always felt and known that was my purpose on this earth. Like that's why I call myself the voice of the thoughts become things movement. Ever since I've been pursuing this, ever since I've learned about the law of attraction, wanted to share it, the waves have been at my back and just thrusted me in this area, meeting different people, going different places, affecting different lives. And so I truly believe that that's my purpose on this earth. And then breaking my name down, I was like, oh, that's dope.
right, right.
That's dope.
And there are many that have that exact same experience, or could have, if they would explore the etymology of their name. And
Yeah.
most often we don't
I
have that
missed it.
kind of interest,
I
right?
missed it for 38 years. I
Right.
didn't even think about it.
And most people never do, right? They don't think about that. My wife and I love etymology of words, and I learned, gosh, I think I was 24, working as a machinist in the aerospace industry, and the guy who drove the forklift to bring the jobs for the machine to us, he looks at my name tag, he says, Benefiel, huh? Good and faithful. And I'm like, what? He said, yeah, that's what your name means. And I'm like, wow. And so, what a given name, and that's from my adopted parents. So I agreed, one could say, I agreed before coming here that that would be part of my structure, right? And then the really trippy thing, my given name's Bruce, which means dweller of the thicket, and I love to get in the thicket of things. Right? So that was a natural thing. I met my birth mother at 61. She would have named me Bruce too, which was kind of bizarre, right?
Wow.
And we had a wonderful reunion. She had all kinds of regrets, and I think riddled herself with cancer because of those regrets that she held without resolve until late in life. And then when we finally met, it was just a wonderful experience. And
How old are you now?
I'm 65, so this was 4 years.
So you got 4 years with her. Nice.
She died 2 years ago, so I was the last item on her bucket list. And once that happened, she evidently somehow internally had staved off 4 different types of cancer that she was in remission with. And then it came back to haunt, with a vengeance, because she'd made peace with herself. I had made peace with her to absolve those regrets that she had, because I had a wonderful life, and because of her willingness to give me up to do so. As in the process, she was already had one daughter. She was 4 years older than me, didn't have a job, and my dad split. And I met him in the late 80s at a UFO discussion group here in Phoenix, and didn't know it until after I found out that when I met her. So, I mean, that kind of bizarre stuff. Yeah. And I'd always, so these are the kinds of things that can happen in life that really give you that flavor of connectedness, whether you recognize it in the moment or not. Now, how have you seen things, especially recently, that life has brought that connectedness in your face?
For me, that's a daily thing. And I'm the type of I don't believe in coincidence. And I experience a lot of coincidences. So when I see it, I'm just like, yeah, I did it again. I just manifested another sign that, I'm supposed to be on this path. I'm the one, let's get it done. My nickname in the police department was, they used to call me the one, like from Neo from the Matrix. Right. They used to call me the one. And so it's like, yeah, when I see those coincidences, I'm like, yeah, it's another sign from the universe, And with my connectedness, my oneness with the universe, it's basically a sign from a higher me, telling me I'm on the right path, keep doing what you're doing, ...
Right.
So I love stuff like that. And here's the thing about signs and opportunities. There could be a million of them a day. But if you don't recognize them, you don't acknowledge them, they don't exist at all. Like, you could have had 17 opportunities in the last 5 minutes, but you'll never even know they existed because you didn't recognize them. You didn't see them. So keep your eyes open for these things. I say accept everything as a sign. Every single thing that happens to me in my life is a sign of some sort.
Live as everything is a miracle, or that nothing is a miracle.
There it is. I can either choose to let it just go by.
Yeah.
Or I can see it for what it is. Look into it. Why would God do that? Why would the universe put that in my path? What can I learn from this? And as soon as I do that, I end up learning what I was meant to learn from it. And I'm like, dang, I'm good. And that's like,
and there's layers of that.
You got to have that oneness. That if you don't have the oneness with the universe, you won't see how it all comes back to you. Once you have that oneness and you take away separation, because one means one, and realize it all comes back to you, that's when you can fully enjoy life. And when stuff happens, like, for instance, I always say that no matter what you ask for, you will be shown, if not proven, that you cannot have it. In other words, doors will slam on you. And it's how you respond to that emotionally determines if and when you get it. So when doors slam, I get happy. I'm like, oh, it's like a tennis match. I hit the ball by putting out my goal. The universe has acknowledged that and is sending me the next step that is necessary.
Right.
Some kind of door slam, and you can't have that. Even if it's someone saying you can't have that, and you saying, yes, I can, and you get it. That's what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
The universe might show you can't have it. So when it hits that ball back at me, that means the game is on. I'm in the process of getting what I want, and it's my turn. I'm going to hit the ball back with masterful perfection. So I see it as a game, and I'm very competitive. I don't like to lose not one match, not one set. So when my brain wakes me up to that feeling right here that I'm about to lose this battle, this mental battle, or I'm in this negative headspace, whatever the situation is, game on.
Yeah.
How fast can I wake up to it? And then what am I going to do once I've woken up to it?
That's the dance that I was talking about earlier, right? Where the
It is
right
a
and left
beautiful
brain
dance.
coincide, and they, because we do have that internal sense of oneness, because that's how creation is. We've got one.
Yes.
Now there's
But
multiple
we not
dimensions
taught
in it.
that. Religion makes us think we're going to get smite thee, and who art thou going to get punished if you think a negative thought, or if you think that. That's why most people don't like to meditate. That's why most people don't like to pray. They say they pray, but they don't want to spend headspace with God because they know he can hear their thoughts.
Mhm.
Every little nasty thought they got about their little neighbor or whatever, God can hear all that. I don't want to spend time with
I
God
got
there.
news for you. That you are
Newsflash.
completely transparent to the universe.
Exactly.
There's
Newsflash.
no secrets whatsoever. The universe never has had secrets. We just haven't learned how to ask the right questions to reveal the mysteries.
Exactly. So what is the point in sitting in the headspace or avoiding praying, avoiding spending space with God, spending time with the universe? Why are you going to avoid that if it can hear all your thoughts anyway? I did a bunch of segments on stuff like that.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of segments, we're just about over with this. What kind of advice can you give to our listeners that would really be most impactful in your mind in in ways to learn that thoughts become things, or to experience that for themselves?
You know what? Obviously, my website, neopositivity.com, I make it a one-stop shop for any information you need. And it's all free. That's my whole thing. Every speech I've done, everything I've given up until the last month was free from 2008 until now, volunteer, because that's how adamant I am about getting this information out there. But if you want to get good at it and you want to work on it, you need some kind of token. I used to carry a pebble because the movie The Secret told me to carry a pebble, but then I lost it a couple times. And
Reminders.
I said, you know what? Reminders, yes. And I said, you know what? I won't lose a $50 poker chip. And I was always in Atlantic City, so I got one. And that was my reminder. Every time I felt in my pocket, what the heck? Oh, that's the poker chip. Let me do my affirmation. Find something like that to do it more often, to manifest more, doing it more often, which will change your life. And I hate to plug it, but I have a wristband that says thoughts become things, stay focused. And it's black and white, so it stands out, and it's right on your wrist. So when that person cuts you off on the highway and you're about to create a whole narrative about who they are and why they cut you off, this keeps you on task. The poker chips, you see them up on the wall, those are on the website, and the t-shirts. So not so much go to my website and purchase my stuff, because most of the stuff I give away anyway. Come to my summit, I'll probably mail you one. But it's to get you a reminder to do this more often than not, because you can learn like I have a subscription where I send out a new mental exercise 5 days a week. You can have that all you want. You can have all the research and paperwork you want, but if you're not doing it, it doesn't count. So get your reminders, things to keep you on task. I got 50 something reminders that go off on my phone. Just one vibrate. If I have time, I click on it, and it's an affirmation pertaining to what I'm going through and what I want to improve in my life. Life is great. I love life. I'm rich. I love money, whatever the situation is. I love $100 bills. It's an accurate statement. The ego has to shut up and let me sit in it. Versus I'm rich, where the ego's going to say, no, you're not. I'm tricking the ego. So find ways to trick the ego. Find a way to wake up more often than not. And that's the only way you're going to win in this game. That's how you get started. Repetition. You can't go in the gym and do 10 curls and walk out and expect to be healthy. That's not how it works. And you can't say I'm rich 10 times and expect to be rich by Tuesday. You get out what you put in. So I suggest you put in a lot. That's why I have 54 alarms and triggers and things hanging up everywhere. So you want to get started. That's how you get started. Manifest your first thing and then use that as fuel to manifest more.
Remember the feeling from the experience, and you can call it up in your file system at any time you want.
Touchdown from high school football.
Yeah.
You can relive that moment and then get the next big bonus at your job from a couple of sales. Whatever the situation is, you could pull it up and relive it. My first paycheck was $146. When I want to feel good about money, I go back to that $146 paycheck.
Mhm.
Relive it.
Cool. Neil, it's been a wonderful conversation. I thank you dearly and love the waiting.
Thank you. Thank you for being a soldier in the war on negativity and taking time out of your day to do this as opposed to whatever else you could be doing. You're helping the world, you're changing the world. So I thank you for that. We need more people like us.
Agreed. Namaste and in la catch. Thank you for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and I will see you next time.